What were the most important announcements that Mr. Macron made tonight?
Well, there were a few announcements. He already mentioned the reduction of the income tax, but he also mentioned that the pensions there will be a minimum pension of €1,000. He also wants classes in primary school to be limited to 24 pupils. There were many more announcements also about the climate. He said the climate should be at the heart of the action in France and Europe, but almost all the announcements were not accompanied by any details. So it's not very clear how he is going to implement all these propositions. Of course, he says this is up to the government. It's not it's not me who decides, it's the government who decides. So he announced a lot of things, but not a lot of details tonight.
So how far do you think this response has gone to satisfying the demands of the Yellow Vest protesters?
Well, basically what Emmanuel Macron said, that the Yellow Vest movement had changed him and that he now was aware of the feelings in the country. But the things he announced were, largely already in part in his election program. So it's not a lot of new things. I expect that the Yellow Vests are not very surprised or not very convinced by what the French president had to offer them. So it's up to, we'll see on social media and the next couple of days how the Yellow Vests will react. But it is clear that although President Emmanuel Macron knows that he has to change, he also said tonight, I will continue with my reforms. So he's basically saying, I've listened to you, but I will continue anyway.
And this is his first national press conference. How did he come across? Because he has been accused in the past of being arrogant and out of touch. Did he change his tone? Did he sound humbler, more friendly?
Not really. There were a couple of questions about his arrogant remarks in the past, and he said that some of them he regretted, others he thought they were, taken out of the context. But he started as a school teacher, basically, giving a history lesson. He used some phrases the French like a lot. But so his arrogance, if you like, or maybe he is just self-assured, is still there. He seems actually unshaken by 6 months of action by the Yellow Vest. But, if his announcements will change anything, that's something we will have to learn in the next couple of weeks, probably. At least the Yellow Vest will be back in the streets this weekend again for the 6th consecutive month.
Stefan, thank you very much for that. Well, let's get some more reaction. Let's hear what people have been saying on social media with Alex and our team in the Cube.
Well, Jeanette, why does social media matter so much in this? Well, this is a movement, the gilets jaunes. There's no central leader. There's no centralised control. This is a movement that grew up through social. Well, here in the Cube, our social media news desk, Matthew, Victoria on my team tonight, we have been looking at the impact this speech has had in terms of its social media footprint, if you like. And I can say, well, Emmanuel Macron certainly made it into the top trends in France anyway. That first hashtag you can see here, conférence de presse, press conference, really the official hashtag that went along with it. But also Macron, that's at 1800 hours, when he started speaking. You've got here, again, you've got Conf there, that's a press conference, but truncated. Emmanuel Macron, people in France were talking about him, and indeed people worldwide were talking about this speech. It is fair to say, Jeanette, there was a huge spike on Google. Today, you can see when Macron was obviously giving this long-awaited address. So people were talking, but what were they saying? One thing that is very interesting, the most interest in terms of Google searches for Macron today, within the last where we're looking here, within the last 7 days, has been coming from francophone countries. We're talking, in fact, we're talking France, Réunion, Martinique, Guadeloupe, St. Helena. So clearly the people who are most interested in the president and what he had to say, you can imagine are those who might be most directly affected. And it's fair to say, among the hardcore of the gilets jaunes, what they heard, it wasn't really what they wanted to hear. Let's bring you up just a couple of remarks. This one here was tweeted in English by a user who says, if you want a very good example of balderdash and empty rhetorics in French, then listen to President Macron's speech. It was pretty damning, especially when you were talking there with Stéphane de Vries. There's questions about his tone, the idea of there's a lot of rhetoric, but it's being described by some on social as balderdash, and that's not a term you hear kicked around all that often, it's fair to say. What about gilets jaunes, people who really are out and out identifying as gilets jaunes? Well, Francois is one of those. You can see actually from his picture here, everything's black and white except himself being pictured with the yellow jacket. And he summarised Macron's approach to the whole thing as almost being like, well, considering the options, if you like, but Francois believes that Emmanuel Macron battered them away. Well, I could do that, but I'm going to stay on the course I'm on. The sense here that this wasn't a great change of direction for France, but rather the French president, sticking with the policies that in many cases annoyed many of those who've joined the Gilets jaunes movement. Are they going away? No, they are planning another weekend. They are planning to go back on the streets, although, of course, we have seen more moderate voices welcoming the president's grand debate, many people saying they were very impressed with the way he handled all these questions from people. But as you can see, Jeanette, from the hardcore of the Gilets jaunes, probably those the president is the most concerned about in terms of their reappearance on the streets, well, they are not going to be satisfied with what they heard from Emmanuel Macron.